guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my wrap up for January of 2022. This video, I'm kind of excited to do it because I didn't read that many books, but I read a couple of really good ones and I'm just excited to share them with you guys. So let's get right into it because I also want to talk about my February TBR. So the first book that I read this year and the first book that I read in January was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I briefly mentioned this in my What I Eat in a Day video where I said that I was going to read this because I saw it. I thought the title sounded really familiar because of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And when I read the back of the book, it promised a time loop, it promised body switching and all these like twisted games and stuff like that, so I just wanted to give this book a try and I'm so glad that I did. This is like my first 5-star read of the year and also just in a while. It's been a while since I've read one that I just was confidently able to say that it is 5 stars for me. I really can't get into the details of this book without either spoiling something or just making it too complicated and maybe not as appealing because there are so many rules to how this whole concept works. But essentially you're following this guy named Aidan Bishop who wakes up in another person's body with no recollection of past memories as his old self, and he only is just in this person's body and stuck in the woods hungover, and he has to solve the murder of this girl named Evelyn Hardcastle within 8 days, but it's the same day and he's switching throughout 8 people's bodies. And he gets like 12 hours within each person's body. It sounds confusing, but I promise that once you get invested in this book, it is so easy to just follow the flow and just want to root for him as a character because he is going through so much and so much turmoil. He's constantly facing death all the time, but it is so good. I think it is well worth the confusion sometimes. It's just a really good book. I didn't expect to like it as much, but I marked a few tabs with like some cool quotes in it. I'm not gonna read those, but please read this book. And it got me into like murder mysteries, so I'm gonna hopefully get into those more often this year. Also, Stuart Turton has another book out, which I wasn't aware of. I thought this was his only and first book, which it is. This is his first book, and this is an amazing debut novel that I would never be able to do something so complex yet pull it off so well. But he has another murder mystery that I'm going to definitely read this year. That is The 7.5 Deaths. The next book that I read was Roxy by Neal and Jarrod Shusterman. If you've been on this channel before, you'll probably see that my first ever book review was for Scythe, which is by Neal Shusterman. And this time he is co-writing again for the second time, I believe, with his son, Jarrod Shusterman. Hi, this is me editing. I just forgot to mention that they did comment, both of them commented on my bookstagram account, which is Literary Pairs, by the way. And they both commented and I don't know, I still freak out about it. It's just so crazy. They're really sweet and that's all I wanted to say. Bye. This book is... it's a little bit, it's complicated too, but like in a different sense, not in the murder mystery sense with a ton of different rules. This is like just a very interesting concept that I do want to mention has drug abuse and depression in it. So already this is going to be a triggering book for some. I did talk about it in a video back in like November where I mentioned this book and Our Violent Ends. I hadn't read it yet and I just got around to it this month, but it's got some really tough subjects in it, so be warned about that. But Roxy is about these drugs that are used in our everyday lives, and they are personified as these kind of like god-like beings who have motives. They have personalities that are revolving somewhat around their drugs' effects. You have 2 characters of that sort. You have Roxy, who is the personification of Oxycontin, and you have Addison, who is the personification of Adderall. And you follow these 2 as they kind of prey upon these 2 siblings, Ivy and Isaac, who are using these drugs for different purposes, but they become addicted over time. And the goals of Roxy and Addison are to take them to the party, which is essentially where you just get super high and you are exposed to other drugs that are of a stronger degree. It's really fatal. They just want to be the only ones to bring them to the very end of their lives. You see the perspective of the siblings, but you also see the perspective of the drugs. I think the problem with this book that people had before it really came out and they only knew of the synopsis was that they were worried that they were going to glorify drug abuse because these 2 do get addicted. It is foreshadowed at the very beginning that one of them is going to die from an overdose, but you don't know which one because they both have the same initials. It's really hard to read because it's so grounded in the fact that these are 2 teenagers characters who are just letting drugs take over their lives, and they have really hard lives anyways, and they're faced with other conflicts, and this drug abuse just makes it worse but also better, and it's really difficult to settle in that. I don't really know how to explain it, but I want to preface this by saying that this book does not glorify or romanticize drug abuse. It definitely doesn't. I think it just brings awareness and raises the topic for discussion about why we should be concerned about any kind of drug overdose or drug addiction, even if it's these other drugs that aren't really meant for that purpose and they're more just to help you, but they can also easily harm you. So I think it does raise awareness about it, but I can understand why people would be kind of like worried about how this book portrays different types of drugs and giving them personalities of their own, because in the end they are harming people, but they can also be used for good. And I think there's just like morally complex things going on here. So I rated this 4 stars on Goodreads. I personally don't have like a solid feeling or rating for it. It was a good book, but my actual feelings on how good it is and how it treats these subjects, I really can't put words to it or any kind of number truly. But I do think this is a good book that for the right audience, I think it would be really good. So just take really good caution for this book and you might like it. Honestly, I'm still wrapping my head around what happened in it, so I'm not gonna make a whole video on it like I'm trying to do for the 7.5 Deaths, but this book is out there for you guys to read if you are interested. So the last book that I actually finished this month was The Awakening by Kate Chopin. This is of course a classic novel. It is about this lady named Edna Pontier who is living in the 1800s that is just very centered around like women do the household work, men go off and do actual work, but Edna wants to do something more with her life, and she's just exploring these different awakenings in which she realizes that she can do more than just be this stereotypical woman who follows all the stereotypes and ideals for a woman of her age in this time. So I read this for school. I don't think I would have picked this book up if it weren't for the fact that I had to read it for school, but you know what, it wasn't that bad. I marked a lot of stuff throughout. This is probably the most I've ever truly annotated. Like, you know, we got some of this, we have some pen markings. This is strictly for school. I don't like write on my books usually, but it actually was not that bad. I think I'm still iffy on it. I did rate it like 3 stars on Goodreads. It's always for books that I am required to read for school that I don't feel an absolute connection to, because the fact that I am having to read it in a certain amount of time, I have mixed feelings on it, but I think it was a pretty decent read. I've disliked books more. Catcher in the Rye. Okay, so that's all I'm gonna say for those books that I actually finished this month. I'm just gonna briefly mention some that I started reading, I didn't finish. First we have Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. This is another book that I am required to read for school. I didn't finish it because we didn't end up going over it this month, but I will finish it next month in February. Okay, and the last book that I got 20 pages into is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. I saw this book on the table. I thought this looked fun, so I got it. I really don't know what's going on here. Like I said, I'm only like 20 pages into the book. Not even 20, 19. So I will finish this in February, but I wanted to talk about my plans for my February TBR. I wanted to stick to a certain theme, and that is romance. I'm not going to read strictly romance because I just don't have enough books that I have in mind to read that are just strictly romance genre, but I wanted to read books that have a romance in them because I'm a sucker for romance in any kind of genre, and also I have a lot of books that I haven't read that have romances in them that I'm invested in, so I want to do something along those lines. So right now for my lineup, I have Our Violent Ends by Chloe Gong, which is the sequel to These Violent Delights. We have Dance of Thieves by Mary Pearson, which is about a thief, and I don't know who the other guy is. I don't know who the love interest is, but they're enemies to lovers and they have like this forced proximity trope put upon them, so there's that. And I got recommended Dante and Aristotle, so I might look into that book as well. Please stay tuned for any upcoming videos. I don't really know what I'm gonna do, but I'm just hoping to upload more frequently and just talk to you guys more about the books that I'm reading. I also wanted to show the axolotl that I have. Her name is Sushi. That's all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.